Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch. As you know, many of us have found our way here together through our fascination with crime. And today we are fortunate enough to have Court TV and be able to step into the courtroom without leaving our home. But return with me to a more innocent time when we got our kick on crime from television, specifically from TV detective programs of the 1970s, where everything was laid out. The crime was committed and solved in 60 minutes, minus the commercials, which puts us at, 42 minutes or something like that? It was a glorious time, and I was fascinated by these programs, as I assume Vinnie and Al were as well. Programs like Starsky and Hutch, they were like the rocking detectives, for the youth. They dressed kind of cool and then of course there was
ABC though. I didn't watch any. I don't think I watched any of my detective shows on ABC. I think
really
on CBS.
Interesting.
CBS was like Mannix, Cannon, Barnaby Jones.
Yes.
5-0.
Barnaby Jones was CBS. Barnaby Jones. Story of an octogenarian that was trying to solve crimes. It's a wonderful thing. Or Cannon. A guy who could barely get out of his car chasing.
Oh, wait a minute.
Down the street.
Wait. Cannon had the first car phone of anybody. He had a phone in his car in the 70s.
It was like a phone, right?
And it was a paid phone.
That was the coolest thing, because before there were cell phones, everyone's walking around with them. And you kids, there was a time we didn't have these things. I remember my friend Joe Forcione was the one of us to get the mobile phone, which was at the time a car phone. It was built into the car. You didn't take it out of the car, but you can call from the car. It was the coolest thing. The only thing was he wouldn't let any of us make calls because they were too expensive.
I saw at a museum once, I saw a car owned by Isaac Hayes that was gold plated, like actual gold, like he used his shaft money for it. And it had not only had a phone, but it had a television in the back. It was built into the back seat, but it looked like a primitive black and white that your mom would put you in front of in the kitchen or something like that. So you can watch.
Speaking of Shaft, can we take a moment to remember Richard Brown? Should we? We lost another icon.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Sadly, it kind of went a little unattributed, unheralded. I thought.
Not on this show. Not on this show.
Nah.
Who is the man?
Watch your mouth.
That's true.
Watch your mouth. That's all I got to say.
And he was a private.
That was one bad mother
trucker.
Watch your mouth.
Well,
wait, can we have a moment? Can we have a moment?
Sure.
Moment. Let's just remember.
I think of the way he came in on the rope from the roof in the end at the hotel, through the glass, kicking through the glass and all that leather with the machine gun blasting. That's how I remember him.
I had the album, and it wasn't just Shaft that was on. It wasn't an album from Isaac Hayes. It was this album, and I don't have it anymore. I don't know what happened to it, but it had the theme to Shaft, the theme to Superfly, and a bunch of other ones, but they were all on one collection. It was amazing.
Nice.
Amazing. That's the one record from my collection that when I moved and went through everything and recategorized and figured out what I was keeping, what I was getting rid of, I didn't find it. I didn't come across. So,
well, the musical themes.
But the Movers stole it. I think the Movers must have stole it.
Well, I would too if I saw such an item. And I'm not much of a thief, but albums, that's different. Somebody lends you an album, you never return it. We've all done that, I'm sure. But the TV themes, the detective shows of the TV detective shows also had great themes, and they would often chart on the music charts and get played on the radio because you'd hear them once a week. They'd become like, staples, like the theme from Beretta by Sammy Davis Jr. And it's interesting that you didn't watch ABC because ABC was the startup network. CBS and NBC were they had been around forever, and ABC was kind of like the Fox TV of its generation. They tried different things, unusual things. I think they maybe tried to be a little bit edgier to get noticed.
Well, I think the one police show I definitely watched on ABC. And this is just police shows, though, because I watched Happy Days, Welcome Back, Kotter,
Right.
Shirley, Morgan. I watched all that on ABC, the sitcoms. The only police drama I believe that I watched on ABC back in the day was The Rookies.
Oh, yes. Yes, Kate Jackson, before
Michael Onkine.
D'Artagnan. What's that?
Michael Onkine was one of the rookies, and he was a professional hockey player that got injured. I think he had an eye injury, so he came back, and he was a good-looking guy, so he was an actor. And he was in a little film that you may have seen called Slapshot. And he played the one guy that wanted to play hockey the right way. And at the end of the movie, he takes off all his clothes and skates around the ice with the championship trophy. And if you look at the end of that movie, you'll see it is a Robert Wunsch production.
Really?
For those of you scoring at home.
And who is Robert Wunsch? Is that your second cousin twice removed?
He's family that moved to California at the time of World War I, when our studio closed down in Fort Lee, or actually Angwood Cliffs, and we went to the California coast.
Our studio. I love that. And they didn't go out there for the gold rush.
Went out there for the sun. That's why they were doing it, because World War I, what ended up happening was there was limitations on coal. There was limitations on different things because of the war effort. So you needed a place where the sun beat longer and a place where it was a lot easier to film. And California offered that opportunity. So it was economically more feasible than spending the money that they had to on the Palisades, where Champion Studios was located, and trying to work with the elements there. So that's why everyone moved out. I mean, all those movie studios that were in Fort Lee and Angwood Cliffs all moved west. And Robert Wunsch was one of those.
Bobby Wunsch. I remember Bobby Wunsch. Good guy, Bobby.
Good old Bob.
Good old guy, Bobby.
I believe Robert.
But he was one of Robert Urich was in the River. He was like the big breakout star of that.
Yeah, he was in everything.
Also, wasn't SWAT on ABC?
Yes. First.
Ever watched SWAT?
Why did I watch SWAT? Never watched. It was on.
SWAT was great.
I watch it.
Oh, the theme was great. It was exciting. When I was a kid, when the UPS truck
Forrest, right?
Forrest? Yes. When I was a kid, the UPS truck looked very much like the SWAT truck. So, like, the kids would all get excited when it came down the block. You'd expect them to come jumping out with machine guns. How could you not like that?
I liked the theme song. I had the 45.
Rhythm Heritage.
I would use it on the soundtrack of some of my Super 8 movies that I made as a child, but I did not watch SWAT. No, I didn't watch it. It wasn't on CBS. Now, on the weekends, because of football, sometimes I'd land on NBC and I'd end up watching, of course, Columbo, McMillan and Wife, McCloud. So I would watch those on the Sunday night.
Banachek was a part of that wheel.
Yeah, and that was the one I didn't watch that much.
George Papard.
Yeah, I love Columbo. He was number one with me, and then number two was McCloud on his horse.
I still watch Columbo regularly. They do marathons on Sundays, and it's fantastic. It's interesting because it starts out with the crime. Peter Falk doesn't even show up often until like 20 minutes into it, and then and then he slowly pieces the clues together. You can kind of see his mind working, so you get an idea that this here is a clue to what is going to unravel the crime eventually.
Was his cigar ever lit in that show?
Never.
Well, there was never lit. He was getting off an elevator once. Oh, yes, you're right. He was on an elevator once. He got off in a hospital and was told no smoking, and he said this is not lit, and they made him put it out anyway. So yes, it was never lit.
And was he Italian?
Beats me.
I think he was Italian. That would make sense. Ends in a vowel. So
I'm told a friend of mine who worked with him, I'm told he was very much like the character.
Oh,
he was often disheveled. He was kind of frugal. My friend was an artist who made his own frames. So he took it upon himself to bring in some artwork and some photographs and said, will you frame this for me? Never once offered to pay him or anything like that. He just fully expected the favors. That's old school show business, though, you know?
Well, I can tell you that one other thing with him was that he was very cranky on the set, and he had a tendency to mumble, okay? And as a result of that, they would be afraid to make him do a second take or a third take or something, because he'd get all frustrated, get yelled at, and start screaming at people. So they hired Charlie Callis to do voiceovers on the scenes where he was mumbling.
Wow. That's fantastic. He also, that jalopy of a car that he drove was actually his, if I'm not mistaken, as was the dog who was just was just like a very lazy basset who never did anything.
That's pretty funny. Now, what? Yeah. With his, did he? What was the deal? Was he blind in one eye? Was there something?
Glass eye.
He did have a glass eye. Okay, because it was a good glass eye because I knew that people would talk about it, but when I watched the show, never really read.
Well, you would notice the one eye, like one eyelid drooped down, and that was on the glass eye.
I actually have a condition like a bulging eye from some, it's a long story, but people have actually said to me, strangers have walked up to me and said, "Is that a glass eye?" And I'm like, I think it's fascinating that they think I have a glass eye, but is that really appropriate to say to somebody?
No, it's not.
Sammy Davis Jr.
When they come up to you and say, "Is that a glass eye?" Just go, "No." Is that a hair or lip? And go with that.
Sammy Davis Jr. had a glass eye.
Yeah, well, he used to wear an eye patch too. Didn't he wear an eye patch for a while?
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes he did.
Yeah. Saw him in an episode of The Rifleman the other day. He was fantastic, as always.
He was shooting a rifle?
He was in The Rifleman with Chuck Connors.
Oh, Chuck Connors, another athlete, right? Was he a baseball?
He was a Dodger. He was a Brooklyn Dodger and a Los Angeles Dodger who turned out.
That's right.
But he was on the team with the shot heard around the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow. Now, my favorite athlete turned TV detective or cop, Ed Marinaro.
Ed Marinaro. I can't play.
New Jersey's own Ed Marinaro from New Milford, New Jersey. Went and played at New Milford.
Part of the crew on Hill Street Blues.
Oh, yes. No, I never watched Hill Street Blues. Amazing show. I know. I don't know why, but I just never watched it. And it's an amazing show. I did get into NYPD Blue, which I believe was kind of like,
more extreme version.
Yeah. Yeah, I got into that big time, but never Hill Street Blues. And I don't know why. Maybe it was the wrong night.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about NYPD Blue because Sipowicz, whoever, Ed Franz.
Dennis Franz.
Right? Dennis Franz, not Ed Franz. I don't know who Ed Franz is. Ed Franz owes me $5. Dennis Franz. So in Hill Street Blues, did they ever tell us where that was? But I always presumed it was like near Chicago.
It was in Hill Street.
Where? But where is that? I didn't know where.
Hence the Blues.
And then, but he has like that heavy, Midwest Chicago tough guy accent. And then he became part of NYPD Blue. And did you buy him as a New York cop?
Yes, I was really into it, and especially in the first season or so, he was very gritty. He was almost kind of like a bad cop. But
that was his character in Hill Street Blues.
He became lovable as time went on. He was also the cop in The Fugitive. In The Fugitive,
that was the whole problem with the show is that all of a sudden he went from being the bad cop, the guy that would rough people up, and also whether or not he was on the take or not on the take, or he was stealing. It was always a question.
Well, sadly, that always happens. Sadly, in soap operas, pro wrestling, and TV, when a bad guy character becomes beloved by the audience, the producers make the mistake of flipping him. Which the whole reason they love him is because of his edginess.
Yeah,
that's right. That's why The Shield was so good. That's why The Shield was excellent. Speaking of cop show,
I don't know how many episodes of that I watched.
Really? Oh my gosh! I gotta tell you, it was so well.
That was with the guy who played the commish, which I did watch.
That's the guy who played the commish, and was also the guy that Jerry had to stay at his house to get a ride back from the Hamptons. An episode of Seinfeld in the first season. Yep.
All right, can we talk Lady Cops for just a second? Because
yes, please.
Yes, Angie Dickinson.
Angie Dickinson, right? That was part of the Sunday night too, wasn't it? Policewoman, or was it on afterwards, or it was NBC?
It was NBC. That's right. I think it was Sunday night. That would have made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, then you also had McMillan and wife. There was the wife. There was female.
But I don't know why, but I was just the biggest fan of Cagney and Lacey.
Oh yeah,
Just because you're nothing but an old. That's what you are.
Oh, we have to bleep that out. So
no, Dyke isn't a bad word. Dick Van Dyke, remember?
He keeps saying it, Jonesy. Like now, I got to bleep 3 of them. It's gonna, how long does it take me to edit this episode now? So anyhow, you're worse than Darnell at this point. So, but it was must see. Like, I looked forward to it and made sure that I watched it. And this is, before DVRs and everything. So you had to be there to watch it. And I was watching every episode of Cagney and Lacey week after week. And I to this day, I still don't know why. There was something about the show that I liked.
The guy who played the husband, his last name was Carlin, with a K. He actually was a longtime star of Dark Shadows, which I truly loved. So I was glad to see him work. I was glad to see him, move on. And I believe
favorite lady cop. Favorite lady cop.
Best supporting actor, I believe he won.
Who's your favorite lady cop?
Honey West. Well, no, she was a secret agent. There was a show in the 60s, Honey West. She would dress really sexy, like go-go, like she was going to the go-go or something like that. She kept a little tiny pistol in her boot. And I don't think she was a detective, though. I think she was a secret agent.
Now,
Rizzoli and Isles. Rizzoli and Isles. That, I met Angie Harmon, and you can't but not fall in love with her when you meet her. She's absolutely gorgeous. And so she's my favorite lady cop.
So how about, did you ever watch, and we're not going back to the 70s here. We're only going back, I don't know if it's like 15 years at this point, 10 years, whatever it is. But when J-Lo and Ray Liotta were on a show, I think it was on NBC.
Yes. Blew something or another.
They were all dirty cops. It was like they were all dirty cops.
Yes. It was fantastic.
Different levels of dirt. It was unreal, that show.
And it was made, Ray Liotta was made for that episode. Ray Liotta would, his character would go into gay bars, go off into the alley and do his thing. And to see Ray Liotta play that, to see that played out on TV, it was gritty. It was, and he was always throwing someone off the roof or doing like a pound of cocaine.
It was probably one of the edgiest, like, regular broadcast television cop shows ever. I mean, they could edgier than seeing Dennis Franz's butt. Edgier than Dennis Franz's butt.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Remember that too?
The thing about NYPD Blue is, he had to hold the fort down because all the supporting actors kept leaving. The first one left because he wanted to go be a Hollywood star. Didn't work out for him. He had to come out and come back.
Who was first? It was
Caruso, the guy from CSI.
Oh, it was which was the Irish guy, the redhead.
Caruso.
Yes, David Caruso.
Yeah. So he had a no compete clause because he thought he was going to go be a Hollywood star. It didn't work out for him, and eventually he had to come back and ask the producers for permission to do the CSI franchise, which finally put his career back on track. He was in a movie called King of New York, a very edgy detective movie as well. But a lot of the actors kept leaving, like Jimmy Smits, who had he died over 4 weeks. It was the most touching death ever on TV, his character. And they would all leave because it was so difficult to work with the producers and writers. They wouldn't get the scripts They'd wait like 13 hours on the set, then we handed a script.
That's nuts. Now, there were some other folks made some interesting appearances there, and you looked at them a lot differently. The guy from Saved by the Ricky Schroeder.
Yeah.
Ricky Schroeder came in there, and he was fantastic.
He was edgy. When he first came in, you didn't think he would ever make it, but he was edgy. He would go drink his troubles away at the end of the shift. Yeah, he was a powerful character, and you wouldn't expect him to play that kind of dirty, gritty man.
Good. I bought it, and then he left, and then the kid from Saved by the Kid, he's a grown man, obviously, but Saved by the Bell came
Right.
in.
Yeah.
And he was good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they just kept, and then, Dennis Franz, of course, held down the fort. He was the guy who was always there. But they managed to keep it going with new characters, which often is the death of the show,
Yeah.
That's true.
Well then, what have we learned? Yeah, I don't know. Well, thanks.
We're going to keep our eye on the Sparrow, right?
Yeah.
We got to do that. And
Right. Dennis Franz,
we got to book him, Dano.
book him, Dano. Well,
And who could forget Kojak? Let's remember that.
Kojak. Oh man, that's
That's my favorite. CBS.
yes, Kojak.
Kraka.
And on that note, say goodnight, Al.
Good night. Auf Wiedersehen to all.